In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 13th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. West Virginia versus Houston. You have a matchup here where one team treats basketball like a stress test and the other is trying to prove it can survive that kind of pressure for a full 40 minutes. Houston rolls in with a roughly 15-1 style record and a 3-0 start in conference play. And they treat home games like something you lock in a safe and check twice. They rarely slip on their own floor, they slow everything down, and they squeeze so much out of each possession that the shot clock almost feels shorter for whoever is trying to score on them. Their approach is not complicated, but it is ruthless. Houston leans on physical defense that sticks to ball handlers, keeps the ball out of easy spots, and turns every cut into a small collision. They are comfortable in games with that low 60s type tempo, which means there are fewer possessions for an underdog to make up ground. That is where they usually find that one long stretch where the other team does not see a clean look, shots rim out, and suddenly a close contest has turned into a double-digit gap on the scoreboard. On the other side, West Virginia is not just walking in as some soft spot on the schedule. They bring an 11-5 kind of record, a tough defensive identity, and that recent win over a ranked Kansas group that shows they are not intimidated by a big name across from them. Honor Huff can heat up from the perimeter, Brennan Lorian brings a lively presence, and the roster has already shown it can defend with real purpose and force good teams to grind through possessions. So the story is not that they are weak, it is that they are stepping into a building where plenty of talented visitors have shown up confident and walked out wondering why their offense looked so stuck. Honestly, that is where the spread starts to feel a little more understandable. You see a double-digit number attached to a game between two defensive-minded programs, and the first instinct is usually to think it is too generous. Then you remember that Houston has been winning by comfortable margins, that their average result lives in that high teens neighborhood, and that their home track record is full of games where the visiting side never quite gets into rhythm. West Virginia, for all of its toughness, has also had some shakier moments away from home, where the crowd, the physicality, and a few empty trips in a row have combined into those painful scoring droughts. You can picture a version of this game where Huff gives them bursts, where the defense keeps things respectable for a while, and yet the final numbers still show a wide margin because the favorite just keeps leaning on them possession after possession. It becomes that classic question of whether the visitors can sustain 40 minutes against that kind of pressure, and when you stack the styles, the recent form, and the home edge together, the picture tilts in a pretty clear direction. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Cougars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now here is the thing, the projected total sets in that high 120s neighborhood, but both of these groups take real pride in dragging games into something that looks more like a test than a showcase. Houston plays at a deliberately slow tempo, that methodical style where each trip down the court feels like working through a checklist. They score well enough when they need to, but they are not trying to turn this into a sprint. Their calling card is still keeping opponents down around the low 60s, contesting everything, and forcing long half-court sets that drain the clock. When you think about that, you are not exactly imagining a back-and-forth race with early shot clock threes flying from both sides. West Virginia fits that defensive mood, even if they arrive as a road dog. They also build their identity around holding teams in check, closing out hard, and making you work deep into the possession for anything halfway clean. There is a pretty easy picture to draw of both sides running sets, reversing the ball, probing a bit, and only getting a shot up after plenty of time has burned away. That kind of game can still be entertaining, especially if you like tough defense, but it usually does not send the combined score soaring above a mid-range number. Recent meetings between these programs have already leaned toward lower totals, with results that felt more like tactical battles than free-flowing highlight reels. You get scores that land in modest ranges, that sit below similar projections, and that line up with the way both coaches clearly want these games to look. When you blend that history with two strong defenses, a slower tempo, and the natural January conference grind, it becomes easier to picture a final combined score that comes in under what the odds makers are hanging. Sure, there is always the chance of a whistle-heavy night or an outlier shooting performance, but if this matchup follows its usual personality, you expect more contested shots, more late clock possessions, and fewer points on the board than that number suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Iowa State versus Kansas. Allen Fieldhouse is going to be shaking for this one, but the fun twist is that the team walking in from Ames has made a habit of turning loud gyms into quiet libraries this season. They come in undefeated at 16-0 with a top-tier national ranking and a track record that already includes blasting a previous #1 Purdue team on the road and stacking Big 12 wins at Baylor and against Oklahoma State. That is not just a hot start, it is a group that already knows what it feels like to walk into someone else's flagship building, take a punch, and still control the game for 40 minutes. What really matters when you are talking about the spread is how a team behaves on the margins, and Iowa State has been living exactly where bettors care most, the possession-to-possession grind. They shoot efficiently, they share the ball, and they squeeze opponents with a defense that keeps scoring totals in check while still letting their own offense look smooth and confident. They do not waste trips, they take care of the ball better than most, and they punish mistakes with quick threes or runouts that feel like gut punches for whoever is on the other side of the floor. If you have watched them for a few games, you start to feel like every loose ball and every 50-50 rebound somehow finds a cyclone, and that kind of pattern matters a lot more to a spread than one highlight dunk. Now flip it around and look at Kansas. The building is legendary, the banners are real, and the Jayhawks still have plenty of top-shelf talent, but this particular version has been living on a much narrower edge. They have played some wild games already, including a frantic comeback win over TCU and a high-energy shootout feel there, but they have also taken some hits, like the stumble at UCF and the loss at West Virginia that showed how quickly things can tilt when their offense stalls for even a few minutes. You can feel that volatility in their record and in their recent form. It is exciting if you are just watching, a little scarier if you are holding a ticket that needs them to be consistent across both halves. Matchup-wise, this is where the edges start to stack up in one direction. Iowa State brings a backcourt that is comfortable handling pressure and running organized offense, while also being very willing to dig in on defense and turn live ball turnovers into immediate points the other way. Their forwards are strong enough to bang with Kansas inside, and the Cyclones have already proven they can deal with elite front lines when they handled Purdue in that road masterpiece, which is a nice shorthand for saying they are not going to be intimidated by a talented Jayhawk frontcourt. Kansas, on the other hand, has leaned heavily on a brilliant freshman scorer on the perimeter with experienced wings and a powerful big man cleaning up inside, and that is a great formula, but it also means Iowa State's very connected team defense can key on a few main pressure points instead of chasing 5 different go-to options. Then there is the depth and health angle, which quietly matters a ton when you are trying to figure out who can actually separate on the scoreboard. Iowa State's main rotation is intact, the starters are used to playing real minutes, and the only real questions are on pieces that have not been central to the way they are winning games. Kansas still has its core scorers available, but the guard room is a little thinner, with one reserve guard already ruled out for the season and another listed as questionable, which is not the kind of thing you want against a defense that loves to hound ball handlers. In a game that is likely to be physically demanding, emotionally charged, and reffed like a typical conference slugfest, the team that has the steadier ball handling and more reliable 5-man cohesion usually ends up looking a little better than the pre-game number suggested. As our first pick for this matchup, the Iowa State Cyclones to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. If you just glance at box scores, this matchup screams points at first. You see one unbeaten team that has hung big numbers on a bunch of opponents, including a long list of wins where they sailed past 70 and even 90, and you see a home team that just played a 104-100 classic, and your brain instantly whispers, so this one is flying over, right? Honestly, that first instinct is exactly what odds makers are counting on when they hang a lofty number in the high 40s, because it tempts people to chase fireworks without looking at how these teams actually create points. Let me explain why that surface-level read can be a little misleading. Iowa State scores a lot, but they do it without playing some frantic, end-to-end style for 40 minutes. Their pace is fairly controlled, they run real half-court sets, and they pick their spots to run instead of turning every rebound into a track meet. On top of that, their defense chops possessions down to size. They turn people over at one of the better rates in the country, and they make it very hard for opponents to live at the free throw line, which is one of the sneaky ways a college total can creep over late in games. So even when the Cyclones put up a healthy number themselves, the overall game score often stays lower than you would expect just from looking at their own offensive average. Kansas brings a different energy, more streaky and more emotional, but that does not automatically mean this thing becomes a full-on shootout. And their big scoring nights have often come when the opponent is willing to play a faster, looser style, which lets their primary creators get downhill early in the clock and opens up those momentum threes that bring the Allen Fieldhouse crowd to life. When they run into a really disciplined defense that can sit down, switch, and keep the ball in front, like UConn earlier in the season or other top-tier units they have already seen, the shot diet gets tougher, the possessions stretch out, and the final tally tends to land quite a bit lower than the highlight reels suggest. Now layer those two styles on top of each other and think about how this specific game is likely to feel in the second half. Big 12 games between ranked teams often turn into tense, half-court rock fights where every whistle is huge and every empty trip feels like a missed paycheck, and both coaches here are more than happy to grind things out if that is what it takes to win. Iowa State's defense is in the habit of dragging totals down on the road, especially when the building is loud and they really lock in, and recent history between these two schools has leaned heavily toward games that finish under the number, even when the totals were set in a similar neighborhood. Kansas has had some overs lately when things got wild, but those often involved more transition and less structured half-court pressure than they are about to see here, and that is a pretty big difference when you are trying to predict whether this specific total is a shade high. So while the early reaction to this matchup is going to be all about firepower and highlight plays, the more you think through the way both defenses function and the way possessions are likely to slow down once every trip feels like a referendum on the season, the easier it is to picture a scoreboard that never quite keeps pace with that aggressive number hanging in the mid to high 140s. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Oregon versus Nebraska. You look at this matchup and the first thing that jumps out is how different these two teams feel right now. Nebraska rolls in unbeaten at 16-0 overall and 5-0 in Big Ten play, with the building already treating this season like something close to sacred. They are winning by roughly 15 points a night on average, scoring just over 81 and giving up around 66, which is the profile of a team that does not just win, it separates. On the other side, Oregon shows up at 8-8, 1-4 in league games, fresh off an overtime gut punch at Rutgers and a second-half meltdown at home against Ohio State, so the Ducks are dragging some emotional baggage into Lincoln along with the jet lag. That is a rough setup because you are asking a team that has struggled with turnovers, uneven shooting, and closing out games to suddenly walk into one of the loudest barns in the Big Ten and stay composed against a group that has been treating almost every night like a celebration. Here is the thing. Nebraska does not play like a plucky underdog that just happens to be undefeated. They carry themselves like a veteran group that understands how to put its foot on the gas when a game is wobbling. The front court can punish smaller lineups and control the glass, and the guards have just enough creation to tilt matchups without needing hero ball every trip. Even without Connor DeCejian, who is officially out for the season with a right ankle injury, the rotation still runs legitimately 10 deep, which means fresh legs keep coming while the noise builds and opponent decision-making slowly frays. At home, they have already showcased games where they rein in threes in bunches, crash the offensive boards, and still keep their defensive discipline, which is exactly the blend that tends to turn close spreads into lopsided box scores. Meanwhile, Oregon's current form has them living on a knife edge. They just watched Wei Lin go nuclear at Rutgers, only to see that performance wasted by fouls, turnovers, and late-game miscues, then followed it up by grinding through a choppy offensive night where Ohio State smothered their rhythm and went on a massive run in Eugene. That kind of recent history matters in a spread game because it points to a team that can hang for stretches but struggles to string together 40 clean minutes, especially when the environment turns hostile. Layer on the travel, the quick turnaround, and the reality that Nebraska's crowd knows this is the kind of showcase home date that can keep a magical season intact, and suddenly every small Oregon wobble gets amplified. So when you zoom out and think about this as a numbers question rather than a highlight reel, the setup favors the team that has been covering margins regularly instead of the one that has been trying to explain away close losses. Nebraska's combination of depth, physicality, and confidence at home lines up neatly with what you want from a double-digit favorite, while Oregon's recent pattern on the road and in late-game situations leans more toward dangerous but unreliable than trustworthy under pressure. If this spread game turns into a test of who blinks first in front of a fired-up crowd, the profile of the home side fits the role of the team more likely to stretch things beyond the comfort zone of the number rather than nursing a 1 or 2 possession win. As our first pick for this matchup, the Nebraska Cornhuskers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Odds makers opening this one around a mid-140s total, with an implied score right around 79 to 68, are essentially telling you they expect a reasonably fast, reasonably efficient game where both offenses show up. That is not a wild assumption when you realize Nebraska averages a bit over 81 per night and Oregon sits in the mid-70s, while both defenses are solid but not the sort that smother every possession into late clock desperation. What you really have here is a question of pace and shot quality, and on both counts the ingredients for a fun, high-scoring game are very real. Nebraska at home plays with a kind of joyful aggression that is hard to fake. They push off the glass, they are comfortable letting early threes fly, and they do not mind a game that turns into a track meet for stretches because their depth and conditioning let them keep the throttle open longer than most visiting teams. Add in Pinnacle Bank Arena's energy, where a quick 7-0 run can feel like the roof is caving in, and you get long stretches where opponents take quick shots just to try to quiet the crowd, which ironically feeds into tempo rather than calming things down. Even without Esigian spacing the floor, there are still multiple shooters who can heat up, and the bigs are perfectly happy to feast on putbacks when those threes miss, which keeps possessions from dying quietly. Oregon, for all its flaws, is not some slog-it-out grind team either. Their season scoring profile tells you they live in the mid-70s, and that is with some ugly offensive nights already baked into the numbers. When the Ducks are right, the ball moves, their guards get downhill, and stretch forwards like Nate Biddle can drag opposing bigs into uncomfortable spots, either pulling them out to the perimeter or forcing rotations that open up driving lanes and kickouts. The wild part is that even in games where the wheels come off late, like Rutgers and Ohio State, there are long stretches of competent or even eye-catching offense before the turnovers and missed shots pile up. From a total standpoint, those swings are not always a bad thing because they can turn into transition chances the other way and more possessions overall. But here is another subtle thing that leans toward a lively scoreboard. Nebraska's defense is good, but it is not built around walking the ball up and squeezing the life out of the clock. They do not have much incentive to slow this game to a crawl when playing at home as a clear favorite, especially against a team whose strength is more offensive talent than grind-you-down physicality. If the Cornhuskers get any kind of cushion, the final minutes can easily turn into the classic modern college basketball ending, with quick Oregon possessions trying to claw back, early clock threes, and then a parade of free throws if the margin hovers in that uncomfortable late-game zone. So when you think less about who ends up celebrating and more about how the game is likely to feel possession by possession, you get a picture of a matchup where both teams have real paths into the high 60s or better, and where the game script leans toward running, shooting, and late-game fouling rather than a slow, rock fight. If this one follows the pattern of Nebraska's up-tempo home games and Oregon's recent willingness to play in space, you are much more likely to be sweating whether somebody pushes toward 80 than quietly watching a defensive slugfest drift under the number. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida versus Oklahoma. Florida rolls into Norman with that giant invisible crown on their heads, which is what happens when you are the defending national champs and every arena treats you like the main event. They are not coming in as some cute story. They are coming in as a team that went 36-4 last season, cut down nets, and now wears a target on every single road trip. This season, that target has not exactly scared them. Florida sits at 11-5, and those 5 losses are squeezed into a tiny window, a combined 17 points, with 3 of those setbacks coming against teams sitting in the top handful of the national rankings. That is not a group padding the schedule with quiet-by games. That is a group that has basically lived in the deep end while other teams are still putting floaties on. The identity is loud and simple. They overwhelm you with size, bodies, and the sort of length that makes every rebound feel like a 50-50 ball that secretly might be 80-20 in their favor. They are gobbling close to 47 rebounds a night and crushing opponents on the glass by around 16 boards, and that kind of statistical bullying tends to travel pretty well, even when the band and the student section are screaming against you. Now, Oklahoma has made their home floor feel more like a gated community than a gym. They are 8-0 at home with an average margin that looks like a video game blowout, roughly plus 27.5, and you can feel how comfortable they get in that building, how quickly those little runs turn into big ones when the crowd starts smelling blood. The twist here is that very few visitors have walked into Lloyd Noble Center looking like this Florida team, with this blend of toughness, pedigree, and size. Oklahoma is built around a grown backcourt that can really shoot and really score, led by Nigel Pack and Xavier Brown, who are both officially on the roster and putting up real numbers, not mythical ones. Around them, you get versatile forwards like Tay Davis and Darian Reed and a hard-working big in Muhammad Waj, giving them a starting five that has not changed all season. Game notes and current injury reports agree that Oklahoma has no one listed as out, which means this is the fully loaded version of the Sooners, the one that has been beating people up in that gym. Florida is not exactly showing up shorthanded either. Their own core of Thomas Hale, Alex Condon, and Ruben Chinyelu gives them a long, disciplined front line that hammers the glass and lives in the paint. Behind that wall of size, the backcourt of Boogie Fland and Zyvian Lee has already shown it can shred quality defenses, as Tennessee discovered in that 91-67 game where Fland casually put up 23 and made it look like he was playing on a different speed setting. The only real caveat on the personnel front is Florida guard A.J. Brown. He is on the active roster and was fully cleared for basketball activities before the season, but current public injury reports still list him as out with a shoulder issue and no timetable, and he has not been part of the normal game rotation so far. So what you are really handicapping is the version of Florida you just saw march through ranked teams last week, not some hypothetical "what if AJ is back to 30 minutes" scenario. That version of Florida has been flattening good teams by stacking their physicality on top of a defense that grades out very well nationally and an offense that scores in bunches while still controlling the glass and the paint. The story sets up like a classic basketball scene. You have an unbeaten home team, a proud crowd, an offense that has been lighting up visiting scoreboards, and then this battle-tested Florida group, which has already taken punches from elite opponents and keeps coming forward. If you are backing this side, you are really betting that over 40 minutes Florida's size and depth slowly drag the contest into their style of game, that their interior rotation wears down Oklahoma's front line, that the whistle and the rebounding tilt their way, and that the Sooners' perimeter-heavy attack is forced into more tough jumpers and fewer rhythm catch and shoot looks once those legs start to feel all that contact. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Gators to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total number the books are hanging in the mid-150s tells you something about how they expect this one to feel. Nobody is projecting a sleepy rock fight here. On paper, this looks much more like a your turn, my turn show where the scoreboard operator gets tired before either team does. Both sides are living in that mid-80s scoring neighborhood this season, which is not normal, it is loud. Florida just hung 92 on Georgia and then 91 on Tennessee in back-to-back wins over ranked opponents. Those games stopped looking like careful chess matches and started looking like open gym once the Gators found their rhythm, and that is very much the identity they carry into this one. At home, Oklahoma has been a different animal too. They are putting up well over 80 points per outing in Norman, and they have 6 different players averaging double figures in that building. Brown, Pack, Davis, Reed, Wade, and Qualitak are all not only scoring but doing it efficiently at home, all over 50% from the field there, which is exactly how you end up with a team averaging just over 10 made threes a night and still feeling like they left a couple on the rim. Stylistically, it sets up like a game that keeps trying to go fast. Florida's length and pressure create live ball turnovers and long rebounds that turn into instant transition chances. Oklahoma's offense is comfortable taking care of the ball, then firing threes early in the clock instead of nursing every possession, and that naturally pulls the pace forward. On top of that, both teams crash the offensive glass with real commitment, so missed shots are not the end of a possession, they are sometimes the start of an even cleaner look. Even if the game settles down in the half court for stretches, there is a very believable script where you still get 30 or more minutes of trading punches on the scoreboard. Once you get into the closing minutes, things rarely slow down in modern college hoops, they usually speed up in weird ways. Whoever is in front starts living at the free throw line, eating clock and adding points 1 and 2 at a time. The group that is chasing cannot afford to walk the ball up, so you get quick threes, short possessions, and sometimes a little chaos that is great for anyone holding an over ticket. Both coaches have plenty of offensive options, and recent history says they are comfortable riding their scores rather than digging deep for defense-first lineups when games are tight. With no major absences beyond A.J. Brown, with two teams that have repeatedly shown they would rather play in the 80s than the 60s, and with styles that create extra possessions through pace and rebounding and turnovers, the cleanest path you can sketch for this matchup is one where the points keep stacking rather than drying up. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Alabama versus Mississippi State. This Southeastern Conference matchup feels like one of those classic, "Are we sure about that number?" spots where the line looks clean on the screen, but the story on the floor is a little messier. You have Alabama rolling in as the flashy road favorite, ranked, loud, and playing with that full-throttle style that turns every possession into a mini-fire drill and that naturally inflates expectations of a blowout. They are scoring in the low to mid-90s per game, they are near the top nationally in pace, and they have that reputation where the casual bettor basically assumes, yeah, they just run folks out of the gym. Honestly, it feels like every time you check a box score, they have either poured in a huge number or been dragged into one, which is part of why the spread tonight has stretched out to that 6 to 7 point neighborhood on most boards. Now flip it to Mississippi State for a second, because this is where it gets interesting. On paper, they are not some pushover. They are sitting at 10-6 overall and 2-1 in league play, and they just had a 6-game winning streak snapped at Kentucky in a game where the final score looked ugly, but the first 20 minutes showed a team that can absolutely punch up and land first. They have been living in that sweet spot where they score right around 80 a night and give up the mid-70s, which means a lot of tight finishes, a lot of possessions where they have to grind out stops, and a lot of chances to hang around as an underdog rather than vanish. If you have watched any Southeastern Conference hoops in January, you know those midweek home games in Starkville do not feel like neutral site showcases. They feel like long nights for visiting guards trying to organize an offense while the crowd buzzes and every missed jumper turns into a scrum on the glass. Here is the thing that keeps tugging you toward the Bulldogs' side of the number. Their profile is built on toughness on the boards and just enough scoring to stay within 1 or 2 runs of anybody. National metrics and team reports have them near the top of the country in defensive rebounding volume, which is quietly huge against a team like Alabama that lives off second chances and long caroms turning into quick threes. When you chase a fast, jump shot heavy offense off the glass and force them to reset instead of feast on putbacks, those 10 to 12 point it might get out of hand. Stretches often shrink to 6 or 7, and that matters a lot when you are catching a spread in that same range. Mississippi State has also shown a habit of clawing back from rough patches this season, turning early deficits into real games multiple times, which fits the personality of a team that does not panic when they fall behind by a couple of big runs. And then there is the history, the part that both matters and also kind of tricks people. Alabama has absolutely owned the recent head-to-head series, 9 wins in the last 10 meetings, including some blowouts that probably still sting in Starkville. That sort of dominance does not just live in the stats, it seeps into public perception and into how people talk about the matchup on betting shows and social media, which nudges money toward the favorite or pass side. But from a spread perspective, a recent run like that can actually help the underdog now because it encourages the market to price in Alabama control a bit more aggressively than the current gap between these rosters and these statistical profiles really demands. In a game where Alabama can still very much win outright yet struggle to fully separate on the road against a heavy rebounding, physical home team that already proved it will not go away after one bad night at Kentucky, the idea of this turning into a classic favorite wins, underdog covers script is not far-fetched at all. It is basically the main plot line. As our first pick for this matchup, the Mississippi State Bulldogs to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Now, if you just stare at this game total, it almost looks like the scoreboard operator is going to need a warm-up of their own. We are talking about a number sitting in the low 170s to low 173s on most books, which is enormous for college hoops. For context, that is the kind of total where both teams can play fast, both teams can score freely, and you can still come up short if there are even a couple of slow patches, a few empty trips, or a stretch of cold shooting. It is the betting equivalent of asking for a highlight reel game, not just a regular fun one. Alabama absolutely explains why the total is that high. Their offensive engine is one of the most explosive in the country. Their adjusted offensive numbers sit around the very top nationally, and they push tempo like they are allergic to the shot clock. They score a ton, they allow a ton, and most of their box scores read like someone accidentally mashed the turbo setting. If all you looked at was their scoring average and their pace metrics, you would shrug and say, sure, hang any number you want. But even those track meets have a pattern. Some of their highest totals have gotten there because everything broke right, both teams shot well, and whistles did not wreck the rhythm, while other games with similarly huge numbers have ended a shade under because a few empty minutes here and there add up when the bar is set so high. Mississippi State is where the story starts to bend. They are not a plodding, 50-possession team, but they are not naturally wired to live in the 170-plus universe either. Their scoring and defending numbers sit in that middle ground, roughly 84 and mid-70s against, which is more high-scoring modern team than wild pickup game. They rebound well, especially on the defensive glass, and under this coaching staff they have built a reputation for making opponents work in the half-court and not giving away many cheap second chances. That sort of style does not eliminate an over, but it does chip away at the most extreme outcomes where you need both sides flying up and down for the full 40. There is also a very human element here that models and charts hint at but do not fully capture. Mississippi State is coming off that heavy loss at Kentucky, and just about every comment around the program afterward has been about cleaning up transition defense, being tougher with the ball, and handling the speed and shot making they will see from Alabama. We obviously are not in the huddle, so that part is a reasoned read, not a hard fact, but it is logical that their staff will lean into a smart aggression plan rather than getting into a pure foot race again. That usually means a bit more deliberate shot selection, paying extra attention to balance when shots go up, and using timeouts or substitutions to slow those classic Alabama runs where the Tide stack 3 or 4 quick threes in a row. Add in the normal Southeastern Conference game quirks, and the picture gets even more measured. Conference officials tend to call things tighter at times, which leads to free throws, dead balls, and coaches using every stoppage to talk. You get scouting familiarity, so both defenses know the main action's coming, which can drag a few possessions deeper into the clock. Even if the game feels high scoring, you end up with something like a 90 to 80 type finish that lands in the 170s rather than blasting through the mid 170s to 180s range this total is flirting with. The key idea is simple but easy to overlook when you see Alabama's raw numbers. The bar is so high that you can still have a fun, fast, high-scoring matchup and still wind up under. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.